Hello, my name is Samantha Deutch, and I am the Digital Art History Lead at the Frick Art Research Library. Thank you for joining us today for another lunchtime program, virtual workshop, PHAROS, the International Association of Photo Archives, with art historian and founding executive director of PHAROS, Dr. Louisa Wood Ruby. So, without further ado, I will turn this over to Louisa Wood Ruby and look forward to seeing you on the other side for a lively audience Q&A. Thank you, Louisa. It's all yours.
Good afternoon, everybody. I think it is 3 minutes afternoon. So, as Samantha said, I am Louisa Wood Ruby. I was head of research at the Frick Art Research Library for many years. In that position, I became head of PHAROS, the International Association of Photo Archives. And when I retired in 2021, I became the executive director of PHAROS. So while I know that many of you have seen me present before on PHAROS and on our website, many of you probably have not. And so I'm just going to start at the beginning. What is PHAROS? And even further back, what is a photo archive? So a photo archive in this case is an archive of photographs of works of art. These photo archives have started in some cases as early as the late 19th century when photography was in its infancy. It was a very exciting technology for art historians, as you can imagine, because now instead of having to draw their pictures of what they were seeing in museums and in private collections, they could actually take photographs, take them home with them. And eventually art research institutions started collecting these photographs and creating photo archives. And over the years, institutions and some art historians visiting would write on the backs of these photographs. As you can see here, they would add attribution information, provenance information, information about when the photograph was taken, by whom the photograph was taken. And all of this is a very rich documentary source for the history of art. So what is PHAROS? PHAROS is a group of photo archives that have these kinds of collections that realized back in 2013 that they really all needed to get their photo archives online or they would sort of disappear into the dusty bins of history. And they realized that by coming together, they could help each other in the digitizing process. They could help each other with various, just anything that they needed with bringing people on, with researchers, with issues. So PHAROS started out as an association of photo archives. But in 2013, we all met at the Frick Collection a few years ago. Here, there's me. And we were supported by the Crest Foundation for this meeting. And at that meeting, we decided that while we would help each other digitize, we should also create a joint platform of the digital images and information from these photo archives. So that researchers would be able, rather than visiting each separate photo archives in digital collections, bring it all together into one open platform where researchers could seamlessly access all the data and images, which would be aligned and aggregated from a single entry point. So luckily, many institutions, foundations, realized or agreed with us that this was a very worthy goal, and they supported us over the years. As I say, the Crest Foundation gave us the money for this initial meeting. Then they supported us in computer vision. Now, this may sound quaint sort of, now, but 10 years ago, computer vision for art historical use was actually kind of revolutionary, especially for photo archives, because we have literally millions of images. There are many duplicates across, even in specific collections, but also across collections. And for the computer to be able to take these digitized images and realize that they all actually represent the same or similar works of art was a revolutionary thing back in 2014, 2015, when we started working on that. To align the data, we decided to use linked open data. which is a set of design principles for sharing machine-readable interlinked data on the web so that it's possible to combine and query these data. This means that once a PHAROS institution has converted the metadata attached to its PhotoArchive records, this dataset can automatically be linked not only to other PHAROS datasets, but also to outside authority sources such as the Getty's Union list of artist names, or the Deutsches Nationalbibliothek, WIAF, Wikidata, or the Library of Congress. And that way, we know that Titian in the Frick collection is the same Titian as the Titian mentioned in the Zeri data. So this is very useful. PHAROS also decided to use the research space software, which was first developed at the British Museum with funding from the Mellon Foundation. By using the suite of tools offered by Research Space, it's possible to combine and query data on the platform to ask novel questions about artworks, artists, photographers, collections, and the history of photography itself. In 2019, the PHAROS Association successfully applied for and received a grant from the Mellon Foundation to fund a 30-month pilot project to create a beta platform using the Research Space software. The platform taught us a lot, but we were not able to reach our ultimate goal of a working platform. And in fact, you might have seen me present in 2024 the PHAROS platform, and at that time we had the beta platform, and it was not working as well as we would have liked. However, it taught us a lot of things, and we searched for more money, and in 2023 we applied for and received a 3-year Digital Humanities Advancement Level 3 grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities, as well as a matching grant again from the Crest Foundation. Thank you, Crest, for supporting us to work on the computer vision API. The NEH grant, which was abruptly terminated about a year ago, has allowed us to bring the site to production and publication level by updating the back end, redoing the simple search, creating a new back button, performing site-level reconciliation, improving the scalability of the site, and in general, fixing all the problems we encountered during the pilot project. The CREST money, as I said, enable us to update our computer vision API to a better, faster version that supports more images. And we envision that eventually we could have, right now we have about 2.5 million images on the site. That will soon increase. And as we go along, we anticipate it increasing by at least tenfold. So that's why we need a very fast API. To date, we have been able to import the metadata and images of a total of 9 institutions: the Frick Art Research Library, the Fondazione Zeri, the Bibliotheca Hertziana, the Kunsthistorische Institute in Florence, ITATI, the Harvard University Center for Italian Renaissance Studies, Bildarchiv Foto Marburg, Warburg Institute, the RKD, or Netherlands Institute for Art History, and the Paul Mellon Center. And this is a shot from our partners page on the website, on artresearch.net. It doesn't show all the institutions I mentioned, might show some I didn't, but it shows you some of the institutions. And when you get to the partners page, you can click on these different institutions and see their history and what they're all about. As I mentioned, the number of images is about 2.5 million, which shows 1.5 million artworks. There are 7,200 photographers and 124,000 artists, which is quite a lot of numbers, very big numbers. Dumbarton Oaks will also join the website by the end of April, and ITATI is actually currently off the site, so you won't see their images currently, but they will be back on in much better shape than previously in June. And the National Gallery in Washington and Yale are both anticipated, probably Yale sooner than the National Gallery. Yale hopefully this year, and hopefully the National Gallery next year. Since these founding institutions contain mostly images of Western-influenced art, we will be looking in particular at adding institutions with images of art from other areas of the globe. And we'd like we think that that will benefit the creation of kind of a new global art history where we can really compare artworks across cultures. If you know any research photo archive repositories for art outside of Europe or the United States, please do let us know. You can contact Art Research at info@artresearch.net. So it has taken over a decade, as you can hear, have you heard, for PHAROS to achieve the goal of creating artresearch.net. But we finally opened the site without any passwords in the fall of 2025. And although the grant money has obviously made the site possible, it would never have been possible without, and this is just my shout out as the outgoing executive director, without all the dedicated staff time and devotion and extremely hard work of many, many staff members from all of the participating institutions. It's really been an incredible collaborative effort, and I just want to give a shout out to everyone who's been part of PHAROS over all these years. And then finally, and not least, to our technical engineer, Artem Kozlov, whose genius has created the site that we have today. So already some stats of the engaged traffic and its sources to the site since November. This is November to March. Sort of some interesting sources, social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, ChatGPT, etc. And then the not surprising sources, the institutions themselves, the Zeri, the Frick, etc. This is a more sort of in-depth searches. So Google sends quite a lot of people. And then this reflects more the research institutions traffic being redirected to PHAROS. So that is just letting you know that the site is out there. People are getting to it. They actually spend some time here, different amounts of minutes. This is traffic that's not just start page only visits. So these are, actually people looking at it. So we were pretty pleased to see that at our recent meeting. So now I would like to go and give you an actual demo of the website itself. Here it is, artresearch.net. You can see up in the upper left the URL. And as you see here on the right, we have a scrolling group of images. And these images were chosen to give an overall view of the types of photographs, the sort of breadth and depth of the collections themselves. And you can see here that it's not all Western art. We do have some Islamic art. We do have some Mughal art. We do have some Asian art. The photo archives have built works. They have, oops, I'm sorry. I don't know why that went away. They do show the backs of photographs. We have drawings, we have paintings, we have color images, we have black and white images. So this just kind of gives you a nice overview when you first land on the page. The page is actually quite long, but if you scroll down, you can go to About PHAROS. That will sort of sum up what exactly I've just said, more or less. The partners page I showed you briefly before, but here you can see all the current partners and click on the links to learn more about those partners. Further down, we have a list of, as I was mentioning, the number of artworks, artists, photographers, etc. And you can click on those and sort of see searches based on those parameters. We then also put together some searches that actually highlight the benefits of using linked open data. That is bringing in information that the photo archives themselves don't necessarily include in their photo archive records. So let's say with self-portraits, you can just click on that and you get 4,000 results. Which is quite nice, or you can click on, I have to go back and forth a little bit, that's one glitch. Women artists, as I was saying, most of the photo archives don't gender the artists in their databases, but the Getty has that information, the ULAN, and so we combined it with our information, and you can see that we have nearly 2,000 women artists, So that's of interest, and it shows you the kinds of things. Further down, we've created little stories, that kind of types of things that you can see that, you know, are surprises that photo archives might give you. Here you have the front of a mounted photograph, a color photograph, a sepia photograph. And so obviously the site is bringing together these photographs from, you know, all the different institutions and matching them and then showing them all to you at once. And you might have a series of photographs from different institutions of a work of art over time. So here you have the Holy Family with Saint Joseph here. And then here, which is a later photograph, he's been taken out. And here he was painted back in. So this is the way the picture actually appears now in the Houston Museum of Fine Arts. And he looks quite different. His grin is much friendlier than his grin here, which you can't see in these photographs. But this is the kind of fun thing you see in photo archives. And photo archives, and in particular PHAROS, brings together different parts of, you know, fresco cycles and building cycles all in one record. All of the images are IIIF. I'll show you that a little later. This sort of sums up a little bit of what we do with the technology. Down here we have Contact Us, as I mentioned, info at Art Research, and then you can read more. And then there's all these search guides and things down at the bottom, as well as intellectual property information, open access, etc. That can also be found at the top of every page here with those three little lines there. So I want to do a few searches for you to sort of demonstrate the site and how it works. So I'm going to just, you know, start with something we might all, or many of us might look for, which is the artistician, just to see what, you know, PHAROS has. And we have, you know, 2459 images of works of art that have something to do with Titian. When you get here, you can look at them all in a line like this, which is a little laborious. You could look at them in here. Over here, we have sort of different ways of looking at the images, which is useful. So you can do that with a little bit of metadata, or you could look just images. So if you're really just looking for certain images, that's the quick way to go about it. Meanwhile, we have very useful filters on the left. And the first one here is the production date. So you're thinking Titian, I'm not sure he really did 2,459 paintings. And that's, you know, partly because there are going to be the way the computer vision works is that there are copies and versions by other artists. So if you want to just sort of get to Titian, you see here you can move these little lines and, you know, make the results much smaller, just to works of art that were made during Titian's lifetime. They might not be all by Titian. And in fact, if you go to another drop down, which is a creator, you see, oh, look, there's all these other artists there, and we don't quite know about that. But I'm just going to get back to that in 1 second, go through some of these other filters. There's a has image. Probably you want to click yes, because some of them don't for various reasons, so you don't really want to know. Some of these filters are still not reconciled. Some of the information in here, so material, you see they have not been all reconciled. So this is not a good search filter to use right now. Similarly, the technique is not a good search to use right now, just so you know. Subject matter, on the other hand, is a very rich area because it has been reconciled and it's in better shape at any rate. And the subjects in PHAROS, many of the institutions don't add subject matter, or they add very skimpy subject matter. But when their records are matched with a record from, let's say, the Warburg Institute or the RKD, which have rich subject matters, then those subject matters are inherited by the institution that doesn't have it. So that's a very exciting aspect of PHAROS. Location and repositories still need work as well, which I'll get into later. The type works quite well, paintings or drawings. And the photo archive, you can see here what photo archives are contributing to this search result at the current moment. So I'm going to go back to Creator here, and there, if you this usually shows up, but for some reason sometimes it doesn't. But there's a Rubens in here, and you look and you say, now why is there a Rubens in results of Titian? And as you heard me say a minute ago, the visual comparison tool, picks up copies and versions. So we look at this and we think to ourselves, oh, it's Rubens, but it's after Titian. Again, we are working on creating a better interface that shows that this is a copy of Rubens. I'll show you that in a few minutes. But if you want to see, okay, well, what painting is this a copy of? You go to the upper left here and you can click on similar works. So then you get another whole list, which is very exciting. You get this painting in the Thyssen, the Liechtenstein Museum, which is different, but it's interesting. And you can kind of look through and say, what did the computer vision find? There's all kinds of, different nudes and things. Why did it find it? It can be quite interesting. But if you happen to know, which many of you probably do, that this is a copy of the painting in the National Gallery in Washington, you can go to this record, and here you see a beautiful color image of the original Titian. And in this record, you can see that it combines the records of two photo archives, Photo Marburg and the Fondazione Zeri. And as a result of that, you're getting more images. So if you look down here, there's a list of photographs, and it tells you which photograph is from which institution. And here too, they has the little logos. Now, right now, PHAROS, again, and I'll go into this a little more later, doesn't have all of the information from these photo archives in terms of provenance. And again, I'll go into that a little later. If you want to see more about this work of art than you see here on PHAROS, you can click on the Photo Marburg or the Zeri, the contributing institutions, and you will be taken to their site. So here you see this is the Marburg record, and you can learn more. And this is actually by design so that PHAROS will drive traffic to the websites of the individual institutions, and thus being a benefit of joining PHAROS and adding to artresearch.net. But and also the individual institutions will eventually have links on their records that lead to PHAROS, so that people visiting the individual institutions can see the benefits of what other photo archives say. So the Fondazione Zeri. So that's one of the goals of PHAROS in general. So now I'd like to do another search. I was in Florence for the PHAROS conference recently, and this is not what I don't know how that happened, sorry. And I saw this incredible painting in the Uffizi Verrocchio's Baptism. And this record actually, as you see, combines the records of 4 of the PHAROS institutions, which is very exciting and sort of shows, again, the benefits of the computer vision technology. However, interestingly enough, if you go to similar works on here, you will find that there's another record that has not been reconciled from the Frick Collection's photo archive. And so there's only, in fact, 86,000 artwork records that have been reconciled at this point, but that's coming up and we're working on that. All of these things are working quite well. It's just that one has to be a little patient and kind of search around. And as I mentioned, the provenance information is not always visible in PHAROS yet. But again, you can go to, let's say, the Frick's website, and you can see more detailed provenance, which is sort of fills in for not having it on the site at the moment. Now, the reason it's not filled in yet is because provenance information, as many of you know, there are no real authority sources for that. So I mentioned, Getty ULand for artists and the other ones. And in fact, PHAROS has created a sort of database of photographers, because that's also, there's no real good art photographer database. And what we plan to do, we're hoping, is to make new contributions to the authority sources of private collections, which would be very useful for provenance studies. And that way we can reconcile all of our records and eventually be able to show, let's say, all of the works of art in PHAROS that were owned by a particular collector. So those are things that are, hopefully coming up in the future. And similarly, the mock-up for future record of a very complicated record, as you see, portrait of a lady. And this painting has had has two authors, and it also has alternative attributions. And this is very, very difficult to demonstrate on any kind of website. And this is one of the thorny problems that the metadata working group of PHAROS is working super hard on. And this is their mock-up at the moment. So now I want to do one more search for you. Female artists, French female artists. 18th century. So when I did this search initially, I thought this would show me paintings by French female artists of the 18th century. But I soon realized that what it actually shows me is paintings of French female artists of the 18th century. So that was a very interesting result. And the reason for that is the AI that the site has employed. You might have noticed in what I've been showing you so far, this section here, which I have avoided showing you up to date. And this section helps you see what kinds of things the AI is searching for when you do a particular search. A keyword search is a search, and you go to the little question mark here, and it tells you what it is. Traditional keyword search finds records containing your exact search terms. Okay, that's simple. If you didn't use this search, if you took that out, you actually get the same results, which is kind of odd. The visual search is, it's going slow now, of course, because I'm in a Zoom with all of you. The visual search finds artworks that visually represent the concept of your search terms, even abstract terms or color or black or white photos. And then the most important search is actually the conceptual search. And this search finds records that are thematically related to your search terms, searching across all information and languages. So if you take out the visual search, you're going to get a different result, which isn't loading fast, which is boring. So I'm going to show here, if you want more information on these searches and the way of AI, this is really unfortunate. Of course, it didn't happen anytime I've looked at this before. So I'm going to go back here, but you would click there, and there is an extensive screen for documentation, and it would explain this search in detail, very well written out. And you could play around with these different aspects of using them or not using them. Here we have search sensitivity, which is somewhat self-explanatory. You can do it very precisely or balanced or exploratory. It is a lot of fun. There's a lot to look at. And what I'm trying to do today is kind of show you what's available, and then you can go in. And I'm also just trying to point out that it works quite well and usually quite fast. um, but there are some issues, and a lot of it has to do with the reconciliation. That's the biggest takeaway. I just wanted to point out the IIIF search. You go into a record, and all of the images are IIIF compliant, and we do have a mirror door viewer, so you can look up close, so you can get it small. Eventually, this viewer will be able to include other images for comparison's sake. You will also be able, as users, to have your own accounts, and you will be able to annotate these images and have a user account where you could save that information, or actually save various images that you're interested in using for some kind of presentation or some kind of research work. So that is going to be quite useful. And finally, what I want to show you, which I love, is that we have a reverse image search. So when you're starting here with your just keywords, you can go, just like in Google Images, you can upload an image with this little image search button, upload a file. And I'm picking this file, which is of a Flemish drawing that was part of some work I did for my master's thesis. And I uploaded it to PHAROS, and I was so amazed because it's so obscure that you can't see the original image, but it is represented here on this search result by two records, which have not been reconciled yet. As I mentioned, there's work to be done there. And this is a drawing of Turnus attacking the Trojans, and it's from a series of drawings for the Aeneid by a Flemish artist named Sebastian Vranckx. And if you didn't know that, if you walked into an art gallery and you saw this drawing for sale and you're like, that looks interesting, I like it, what is it? You could upload it to PHAROS and find out that this was the subject. This is in Dutch, but you can translate it on Google at this point, and learn at least that it's by Vranckx, it's 1615, etc., etc. If you really wanted to know more, you could go to the RKD's website. This actually does translate into English, which I won't bother with, but you can find, oh, look, someone wrote an article on an Wood Ruby. So that was a lot of fun. And so, you can upload your own images and see how it goes. If you uploaded this image to Google Images, which I actually didn't do, but my experience so far with Google Images and artworks or obscure artworks is that it gives you a lot of gobbledygook. I mean, sometimes you might hit upon the right thing, but more often you would not. You would hit on all kinds of things, and you wouldn't really know, which of them was correct, if any. And in future, we will have an export function. So if you are interested in doing some kind of digital art history project, I wrote up a kind of thing that might be able to be studied with the data that is in PHAROS. The images and the data are open source, except where indicated. There's on each photograph, there is a license. And I think that is about it. So, questions?
Thank you so much, Louisa. That was great. I know myself, I have used the reverse image search recently, and I searched for a painting that was owned by Mildred Anna Williams from the San Francisco Museum. And the image I showed had work that had been done, so they had taken off some of the background to reveal a little baby. It was supposed to be Mario. And then when I did the reverse image, it showed me the original painting back in the early 20th century when the San Francisco Legion of Honor had published it, and it didn't have the baby. And so this picture was a nun, and she even had her hand clasped up here, like her fabric. But that was not the original state that the artwork was given. So it was really cool that came up. in that search. I love that feature. You know, I'm a good reverse image woman myself.
Definitely.
And I wanted to let you know we just recently started a CREST grant project called Illuminating Provenance. Say that fast. And part of that project is that we're going to be creating a model for provenance research, a large language model. So we'll talk about that maybe
Yes,
later.
yes.
You can employ in the back ends. Anyway, so I will stop being selfish and take up your time. Thank you so much. It was wonderful. And let's see what the audience has. So this is from one of our viewers, and they asked, do you have other media than photographic prints in the database, like scanned slides?
Basically, we have whatever I'm actually retired now, but PHAROS has anything that any photo archive gives us. So if they have born digital images or scans of slides and they upload them to PHAROS, we work with the collections to take on whatever they have and what they want to give to PHAROS.
And this is related to, we were talking about, like if you were at a sale or an auction house or something and you saw a drawing and uploading it, they're saying, can you upload an image right from your iPhone to
Yeah.
the yeah,
I know that
okay.
they've worked on an interface for iPads and iPhones. I have not really used that so much. I think it works pretty well, but I'm not going to vouch for it at the moment, especially after, it was that there were so many people on at one time. I will report that back. Yeah.
Next time I won't share the link
Yeah, never
until
again. Oh my
afterward.
goodness.
Sorry about that. We have another person who's asking if you can explain how AI was utilized to create the database.
Well, AI didn't create the database. It was a very manual process in that, institutions um, transferred their images and their data to PHAROS, and then they were. It actually shows. You remember the on the main page. There's a section that says state of the art technologies, which I kind of zoomed through, but it kind of tells you the process of what happens from an institution, giving and onboarding their data and images onto PHAROS. AI and AI is now used. Well, we're working how to use AI, as I say, with the searches, as mostly we're using AI mostly at this point just for searches, like I was showing you, and I couldn't fully show you because it wasn't loading. But you can look. That's a very extensive help page. It's also listed on the top three on the upper right or at the bottom. You can go right to that search page, and it explains exactly how the site is using AI. We will be using AI to do a lot of these reconciliations. The reconciliations are a big thorny problem still, and we're working on using that in a responsible way. I feel that for this site, AI works quite well and quite responsibly. And they are starting to use AI to speed up the process of reconciliation, which is actually quite time consuming.
And exactly what it should be used for, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly what it should be used for. That is what AI is good for, and that's useful for everybody.
Exactly. Okay, so I had another question. It's the same person. Does the database include accurate scale and media specs? I guess dimensions.
The data, the data includes this. The data again. The data is what is given to PHAROS by the institution. So if the Frick doesn't have the dimensions of a work of art, then PHAROS won't have the dimensions of the work of art. I would say that most of the institutions do have the dimensions, but PHAROS, as of yet, doesn't show the images in scale. It's not like, if I showed you the screen, it would have a big fresco and then a tiny drawing. And it doesn't display it in scale, but mostly each image has the dimensions of the work of art. I don't know if that is exactly what you were asking, but that's that I can answer.
I have another response. It's a nice, what a phenomenal resource. They understand that much is still in progress, but so many considerations have been taken into account. Thank you for your hard work. So it's not really a question. Sorry about that. Oh, here's one. Hi, Louisa. Thank you so much. This is from Tom. This is exciting. Are the rules about use of images made clear in the database?
Yeah, as I say, each image, I didn't actually show you those licenses, but underneath there's on one side there's the images, and on the other side is the metadata. Sort of lower down, I kind of pointed it out. You might have noticed it says photographs, and then there's a list of all the photographs. Each one of those is its own record, and each one of those should have licensing information about whether you can use it or not, or whether you contact the institution, or exactly how the institution wants you to deal with it. But mostly they're really available. That was one of the sort of stipulations of joining PHAROS, is that, there's no like paywall or something like that.
And I think you kind of mentioned this because you have controls for the AI, but there's a question asking, can AI be excluded from being used in the search?
Yeah, you could just do a keyword search. That's a normal keyword search. So you could get rid of the conceptual and the visual. And I would have demonstrated that, but that was when we had all the glitches, so I'm sorry. The keyword search, if I had done that, would have given us a much broader result, because it would have looked at the words female, artist, 18th century, it would have looked at all the words separately and found those words if they appeared in any record. So, but when you added the conceptual, it got the idea that, oh, you're looking for pictures of female artists of the 18th century, because the AI has been trained on other models. So if you put in red flowers, I actually wanted to show you this, but since the site wasn't, acting well, I couldn't. But anyway, try red flowers, which is one of the examples in the search, the help that I also wasn't able to show you. It actually finds red flowers that are red, in color images that you can see, but then it extrapolates that, oh, these flowers with this shape are red. And so then it actually shows you black and white photographs of the same flowers, which of course sometimes isn't true, because you could have, let's say, a rose that was red in one picture, but actually the black and white is showing a yellow. But anyway, so the AI does that, which is quite interesting. The AI itself is trained on images outside of PHAROS, but then they apply it to the images in PHAROS. But anyway, cool. You can exclude it. Because a lot of us old-fashioned people were kind of like, when we were first shown the AI, we're like, I don't know. So we really wanted it to be clear. Oh, and also, I didn't say this, but each record or each result tells you how the site found that result. So it says textual similarity, visual similarity, conceptual similarity. So you can see why the machine brought you that result. So it's actually labeled there, so you understand the results that you're getting.
Really transparent.
Yeah. Because otherwise people go, why did they give me this? And it's annoying, Yeah. And you want to know what
historian.
Yes, so that was the whole project's been very interesting, with art historians working with technical engineers, because they don't care why you get the result, but that's the whole thing about art historians. What are they looking at? Why is this? So it's been a wonderful dialogue that we've had going all these years between the two areas.
So I have another more specific question, and this has to do with photographers, and it says, what is the best way to use the site to research photographers? Is it possible to see active dates, nationalities, etc.? Are there links out to ULAN?
You can definitely look for a photographer and find all the photographs that that photographer is attributed as taking that are in the site. Um, I'm not exactly sure at different points of this site. As I said, the photographers, there's no good authority file for the photographers. Like ULAN is not that great. There's an NYPL one that we used, but they actually the metadata group reconciled all of the photographers, I think, or almost all of the photographers on the site, and so and I'm not sure if they've linked them. If you go to the name of the photographer, if you find their dates, I'm not sure about that. That's a good question.
Okay. And then, can I search for works of art on parchment or works in silver point?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I was trying to show you the filters. So you have material and technique. Um, they're not they're not all reconciled, so you might have to check a number of boxes. So you would have silver, you'd have it in different languages and different words and different ways of saying it, but you could find things like that. Yeah, because those again, that information is in the individual record. If the information, which it should be, is in the individual records from the institutions, then it would show up in PHAROS. It's just a little hard to find all of them at once, but you could find definitely some of them. And then in one of the searches that I showed on the front page, one of the ones we sort of pre-did for you, we pre-did a red chalk drawing. You can click on that, and that would be analogous. And so it found all the red chalk drawings in the data in the site.
There's a lot of questions in the chat and in the mostly in the chat. There is one I'm bringing up in the Q&A that was asking if the images are downloadable, but then also asking uploading images. This is kind of a two-part piece. One, doing the image reverse the search before. That's uploading to just kind of search a system. It's not
Yeah.
adding a
No,
photo to the collection.
no.
There is somebody here who they said they have a collection they'd like to add. Do you allow that for people to add works of art?
Well, no, you would have if you wanted to add you have to become a member of PHAROS. You would write to info@artresearch.net and talk to them. No.
Okay. And the images can be downloadable if they're usable.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
And eventually, I'm not sure how that works right at the moment. But if it's not, as I say, if past iterations you've been able to export to CSV, and I'm not sure where that is right now. I don't think it's that functional, but you can use the images based on the licensing information. I'm just not. I know that that's coming very soon. I checked that before this presentation.
And is there any plan to add decorative arts or sculpture to?
Well, they're on there. That's why I was trying to show you in the beginning. There are
Okay.
sculptures and decorative arts to some degree. No, and not. I mean, it's a matter of what collections are included in the institution. For instance, we're adding Dumbarton Oaks at the end of the month, and it has a lot of Byzantine stuff, which is not that much there. We have an East Asian collection we'd like to join, but all of the institutions have some sculptures, some built works, some deck arts. They're just, and that's another interesting thing about PHAROS in general is sort of having for the institutions who join is kind of looking at your collection and kind of understanding the biases that went into forming the collection. So you might have noticed a lot of the works are Italian because we have 4 Italian institutions and they all have mostly Italian works of art. But luckily the RKD came on and now we have a lot of Dutch and Flemish works of art. The Frick has a lot of American, which none of the others really do. And the Paul Mellon Center has a lot of British art. But all of them have some sculpture, some decorative arts. It's just, I think they would be open, I'm not sure, to a decorative arts collection joining. I think, since we always wanted to get very big, and we hopefully will, but the plan was, it's just taken a really long time for us to get the site so that it's working as well as it is. It really does work now. I know there's the issues. I see someone in the chat something about what does reconciliation means. It means the different photo archives, like, the Frick might call Titian Titian, but the Zeri might call him Tiziano Vecellio or something, which is the Italian version. And Marburg might call him something German. So the reconciliation says, yes, all of these different names point to the same, what they call entity. They're all, and we're using English as the basis. So they all point to Titian, this Titian record that's in the Getty ULAN. So that's a reconciliation. It's trying to understand that different words refer to the same thing. So, the language, it's definitely a problem with language because we have, 4 or 5 different countries on right now. So it's saying all of these things mean the same thing. Okay, got
That's
it.
interesting. You inadvertently asked another question that was in the Q&A, which
Well, I
was,
saw it pop up in the chat. So I thought,
how does the search function handle languages?
oh yeah, no,
we got a 2 for 1 there.
Yeah, that's the great thing about the AI edition is it does handle the languages. We actually, it was one of our very early issues. A long time ago was when we first met in 2013. Everyone was like, "What about the language?" And it was a huge thing to overcome. But AI has actually overcome that. And the other big thing back in 2013, we weren't going to talk about it because it was too big. We'd never do the whole project. And the other thing that was bothered us was the rights, the intellectual property issues. And again, thanks to Cress has just been a really big supporter. We had a big meeting on intellectual property rights at the Paul Mellon Center in London in 2020, right before COVID. And we had lawyers from the EU, the UK, and the US all come together to discuss intellectual property laws in the different areas, geographic areas, and sort of pound out the issues that the different institutions had. Like, why wouldn't you want to show your images, and why would you? And it was a very intense meeting where we really banged out a lot of very difficult problems. And that's actually a benefit of PHAROS for any other kind of international project like this. We worked with a lawyer, Andrea Wallace, who's at in the UK, although she's American. And she's been working a lot on intellectual property for these kinds of digital platforms. And it's, contacting PHAROS to learn more about that. We did so much work. It's also a benefit to the research community.
It's kind of like a little United Nations.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, it is. United Photo Archives of the world.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Louisa. This has been fantastic, and I hope everyone has something good to take away. Thank you all for coming, and thank you, Louisa. This is wonderful, and more soon.